I have a couple staff, they bring blankets. Like, it's to that degree. So, alrighty. All right, aloha, ladies and gentlemen. How's everyone doing this evening? Awesome, awesome. We're so excited to have everyone here. Before we get started, my name is Jessica. I'm the Education Director here at the Maui Ocean Center, and I have the very important job of going over all the housekeeping before we get started. So first and foremost, thank you guys for coming to the Maui Ocean Center's Sea Talk Speaker Series. We're very excited to have you here this evening. Today's program is going to go from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., and we will allocate 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end to finish up the formal presentation. Do you want me to talk into that one? Oh, okay. Got to make sure everything sounds just right, guys. Alrighty, so 6 to 7 is going to be the formal presentation time, and we'll have 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of the formal presentation where you get to ask your questions. We will have staff members that are going to assist us with the Q&A because we are also live streaming this event. So the microphones are very important, so we just ask that you guys, if you have a question, wait for us to bring a microphone over to you so that everybody watching the live stream is able to hear your question as well. If you need to exit the sphere for any reason during the presentation, you can make your way down either set of stairs. If you need to exit into the exhibit hall, that's going to be right over here on this side. Perhaps more importantly, if anybody needs to use the restroom during the presentation, I would recommend coming down and going out this door here. The restroom's going to be located just outside of the door there between the two bushes, and the door does open from both sides. I know, right? The door opens from both sides, so you guys can make your way right back inside. It will make sense if anybody does go to the restroom. There are two bushes on either side. All right, that's that kind of crowd for you guys tonight. All righties. In addition, we do ask that you silence your cell phones out of respect for our speakers. Thank you guys so much for that. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing two guest speakers. So I'll start with Jennifer Learned, and then we'll get into Jay Penniman. So Jenni is a research ecologist working to support the Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project and the seabirds of Maui Nui since 2016. She provides operational support, planning, data analysis, reporting, and educational opportunities in her role. And Jay Penniman has managed the Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project for 18 years. He has a background in seabird biology, where he was a biologist on Southeast Farallon, there we go, island, monitoring 13 breeding bird species and 4 marine mammal species. He has also worked aboard various vessels, monitoring and documenting pelagic seabirds and mammals. So tonight, both of them will dive into the seabirds of Maui Nui, their past, their present, and their future. Without further delay, please help me in providing a warm welcome. We're going to be inviting Jennifer Learned up first.
Is this on? Do I turn this on? It's on? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Jess, and a big thank you to everybody for coming this evening, and a big thanks to the Maui Ocean Center for having us. We're very excited to be back here for the Sea Talk. This isn't our first time here, but it's always a really excellent event, so we're really grateful to be part of it again. And we're actually extra excited this time because we are celebrating the new Seabird kiosk exhibit here at the Maui Ocean Center. So if you haven't seen it yet, please make sure to check it out next time you're visiting out in the exhibits. So the Maui Nui Seabird Recovery Project is a project of the Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit at UH, and we work closely with our partners and collaborators, including the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, our state partners, and also our nonprofit sponsors, Pacific Rim Conservation. And a lot of the hard work that goes into conserving seabirds, both from our partners and collaborators, and also our staff that contributed to what I'm going to discuss today. I just really wanted to acknowledge that. But also, importantly, we have a lot of work that is performed by our kupu service members every year. We have AmeriCorps service members that really provide a lot of foundation to all of the work that we do. So just wanted to also acknowledge them, and that kupu is a wonderful part of a lot of the conservation work that goes on in the islands. Yes, I can stand closer too. Is that any better? A little bit more? Okay, is that better? Okay. No? If I hold it, it'll end up down here towards the floor, so I just have to. Okay, I'll try to lean closer.
Coming in for the rescue, guys. Here we go. Bring it up.
Thanks. Oh, that's better, yeah.
Right, go ahead.
Okay, there. Good? Okay, I will speak up. Okay, so yes, as Jess said, I'm going to be talking about the seabirds of Maui Nui, past, present, and future. But before I start with the history, oh, there's a thing on the... sorry, hold on. Okay, there we go. I thought I would introduce seabirds so we can get acquainted with the seabirds themselves. So, Namanu Okekai, or the birds of our sea, what are they? Well, there are a lot of general characteristics of seabirds, and of course there are exceptions, as there always are, but I'm just going to start with a few that are very typical among all of seabird taxa. So, primarily, seabirds come to land only to breed and raise their young. So this means that for most of their time, they're out over the ocean. They spend most of their time either feeding or foraging or looking for food while they're out over the water. They come to land to find their mates and lay their eggs and raise their chicks. And then when the chicks fledge from the nest, they will be out at sea for several years until they reach maturity and then return again to the colony. And usually the seabirds will return to the colony from which they have fledged from. And this is called philopatric. So this word, philopatric, literally means loving of your home country. So it is pretty typical that the seabirds will not only come to the colony from which they fledged once they've matured, but also the adults, once they establish their location, their mate and their breeding location, they will continue to return to that same place every year to raise their chicks. And they have very long lives, so this could be that they will be returning to the same place for several decades. They do have low reproductive output, so usually only maybe one chick per year, but because they have these long lives, they still they do have successful reproduction. So some seabirds may be many decades old. So for example, Wisdom, she is a Laysan albatross or a Maui who lives on Midway Island, and she was banded, I believe, sometime in the 50s, and she is still returning to her nest every year. And finally, seabirds are top predators in all of the world's oceans, so they are a very important part of marine trophic systems. So they tend to hunt for fish and squid and other pelagic invertebrates. And this, not only does this make them important for marine ecosystems, but for humans, fisher people all over the world have been using seabirds as indicators throughout history for these bait fish, which can be harvested, but then also for predator fish that are going after the bait fish that the fishermen want to also use. So they are very recognized for that. So in addition to behavioral characteristics, there are some general morphological characteristics that make a bird a seabird. And so I'd just like to display this beautiful infographic here, which is one of the several that the Maui Ocean Center had created for the seabird kiosk. And then the Moli over here will model these characteristics for you. But there are some things that really stand out when you're looking at a bird that will make it a seabird, and some of these are, they have long wings, and the wings are good for soaring for long distances. They have excellent sensory capabilities, particularly sense of sight and sense of smell. And they can even smell the land and even their burrows or wherever their nest may be from several miles away. And they have special glands that help them excrete salt from their bodies, because they do drink seawater and they get water with their foods, and this gland helps them excrete this salt. And a lot of seabirds, you can see the gland right above their bills. And they do have strong, usually pretty sharp bills, because they are catching very slippery prey when they are diving or fishing for their for the fish or the squid, either from the surface or under the water. And they will sometimes have this typical coloration, like you can see on our model here, where they have a lighter ventral surface and a darker dorsal surface, and this kind of camouflages them while they're out at sea. And you do see colors usually in the black and gray and browns, kind of a muted spectrum. But then another interesting thing about the coloration is that seabirds are usually not sexually dimorphic, so you really can't tell the difference between the males and the females just by looking at their coloration or anything like that. And then finally, a really good characteristic to use is just, if you're wondering if you have a bird, if it's a seabird, you can look at its feet, because usually they will have webbed feet, and this helps them with their swimming and sometimes even with digging when they're making burrows on land. Okay, so into the history, I'm going to start way back in the way past. Birds first arose, we see them first arise in the fossil record during the Jurassic period, which was made famous by their dinosaur relatives. But birds do not fossilize really well because their bones tend to be very lightly built. So we don't have a lot of fossils from early birds, but we do see some specific groups that appear more commonly than others. And this bird, the Hesperornis, shown here, is called also the dawn bird, and there were several locations where there are good records of this bird in the fossil record. So this bird was around 80 to 100 million years ago, and it did have a marine lifestyle, so it was in the oceans fishing, as seabirds do today. However, the lineage that came from dawn birds went extinct, and actually there were several experiments with marine birds that did not make it to this day. Tithystonix, shown also here in the stamp format, was a relative of the modern seabird groups that we do have today. And it was very closely related, and the interesting thing about Tithystonix is that it was around 70 to 60 million years ago, and this actually spans the extinction event that happened between the Cretaceous and the Paleogene era. So when all the dinosaurs died out, Tithystonix was around. And so when we're talking about history too, and we're thinking of these huge time spans, like tens of millions of years, it's important to also remember that not only were all these lineages of organisms arising and evolving and changing, but the surface of the Earth was also changing. So, we have our continents and the tectonic plates that are kind of floating around on the surface of the planet. And this is pretty important here in Hawaii because this is actually what has formed the islands, the current islands, and then also historic islands, which we cannot see from the surface of the sea anymore. So the Hawaiian archipelago includes the main Hawaiian Islands and the northwestern Hawaiian Islands in Papahanaumokuakea Marine Reserve, but then also the Emperor Seamounts, which progress all the way until the plate that they are on is subducted into the planet. So we can track the history of these landforms, and we can see that the oldest seamount that still exists up near the edge of the plate is actually 60 million years old. So when we align this history of the Hawaiian Islands with the history of or at least what we know about seabirds, those seamounts, the oldest seamounts, were actually islands, thriving islands, during the time that the modern seabird orders were already established, and about the time when Tithystonix was still around too. And then over time, there were more lineages of different types of marine birds that evolved, and one was called the pseudodont birds, and this is a picture of one here. They actually had little teeth in their bills. And, but those also, the experiment did not make it, and those lineages went extinct. But then there was a major radiation of modern seabird species about 35 million years ago. And so if we look at the ages of the archipelago that where we are today, the oldest Kure Atoll is the oldest still exposed island, and that's about 30 million years ago. So we know that from that time, throughout, ever since the island, since Kure, the birds have been how they are today. All the species that we have today have been inhabiting these islands all the way since Kure was the main island. So, as the land has been changing and evolving and impacting the diversity and the radiation of these seabird species as the islands are forming and moving and all that, the seabirds are also contributing to the evolution of the land. And that is because seabirds are ecosystem engineers. So this means that they have impact on their land and their environment, and they change it in some way. And it's kind of easy to imagine how this is the case, particularly with seabirds, when you see how they live. So this picture is of Maui on Midway, and on Midway, the very small little island, there are over 500,000, I think, individual birds. So seabirds tend to aggregate and form dense colonies, and so this can have a really big impact on the land where they live. So this can be through physical means. So some seabirds will burrow. They'll dig burrows under the surface, but even if they don't do that, if they're making nests on the land, they are altering that physical landscape structure, and also the vegetation structure that they have to move or adjust to be there. And then all of this activity also results in soil homogenation for that habitat. So these pictures, this just shows, this is a petrel colony in the Atacama Desert in Chile, so you can see how dense those burrows can be. And then this guy here is Uaukani. This is a wedge-tailed shearwater. This is Havea up at Kapalua, where we work with the Uaukani, and I just thought, they're chicks right now, so this is very, that's exactly what it looks like right now, this little bird sticking out of a hole. But you can see this whole landscape is covered with the burrows for this species. So, but probably, arguably more importantly, seabirds also alter the biochemical environment. So this top photo shows a booby colony, and you can see around all of their little nests is a whole nice little halo of guano. So the seabirds are eating incredibly nutrient-dense foods when they're fishing and eating fish and squid and other marine organisms, and then they're transporting all of those nutrients to the land through their guano. And it's been estimated that it's 591 million kilograms of nitrogen and almost 100 million kilograms of phosphorus annually across the globe that is transported back into the terrestrial habitat through the actions of seabirds. And so this is very important to terrestrial environments because this is a great fertilizer, right? Like the guano trade was a major part of history when people realized that this guano could fertilize massive agricultural endeavors. So, but not only does the guano fertilize the vegetation and enhance the soil where the seabirds live, but it also runs off into the nearshore environment. So it is a good foundation for the coral reef. But then even beyond the reef, it has been shown that algae and fishes and all sorts of things that live in that environment have a higher biomass and do much better if they are around an island that has seabirds on it versus if that island doesn't have seabirds. So, and here in Hawaii, you know, I just like to think about what we envision as a really good, you know, healthy, diverse Hawaii forest habitat. We have all these wonderful native species that can flourish on this island, and we know that they can grow on this kind of new, you know, ohia can establish on bare lava, you know, and they do a wonderful job doing that. That's what they've evolved to do. But it really is this contribution from the seabirds that helps it get from there to all these beautiful forests that we recognize. And the seabirds also can bring seeds among the islands, so they play an important role there as well. So this is what they've been doing, the seabirds have been doing for the islands, you know, for 60 million years plus. And before humans arrived, they probably occupied every habitat available on the islands. But then humans arrived about 1,500 years ago. This video shows bone-in petrels coming into their burrows in the evening off Midway. And you can see just the numbers of birds that come in. But this is probably just a mere shadow of what it would have been here, even on Maui, before the humans. And it has been documented, or it has been said, that when they would come in at night, it would black out the sky. So very high numbers of birds would have occupied the islands here. But humans changed the land in many ways that negatively impact the populations of the seabirds. So agriculture that was occurring led to deforestation and also just changes to that lowland ecosystem where the birds would have lived. Also, humans brought pigs, which alter the habitat, but they also can prey on the birds and their eggs. And then seabirds and their eggs were also harvested by humans for consumption and cultural use as well. And then finally introduced predators like cats, rats, and mongooses were introduced, and they just really decimated the populations of the seabirds, and not only seabirds, you know, many native species. But seabirds in particular evolved on islands where there were no predators, so they really lack a lot of the defenses that maybe you would see for continental organisms that are used to having these kinds of threats. But seabirds are not maybe so used to it, so they don't tend to be as prepared to defend themselves. Okay, but today, across all of the islands, so the main islands and then also the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, there are 23 different species of seabirds that breed. In Maui Nui, there are 11, but I'm going to go through the 23 different species in Hawaii. So we have 3 of the world's 13 albatross species, and so that is the short-tailed albatross, this one over here, and then the kaupu, or black-footed albatross, and then the moli, or the laysan albatross in the center, and all of these pictures were taken on Midway. And there are 6 of the world's 55 species of petrels and shearwaters. So this is the ua'u, or the endangered Hawaiian petrel, which we do work with here on Maui. The bone-in petrel is in the center on the top. They are mainly up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, but we do see them visit here from time to time, but they do not breed here. And then ua'u kani, or the wedge-tailed shearwater, is up in this corner, and so they are probably the most common seabird that you would be able to see here on Maui. They are coastal nesters, and they do really well with some protections and when they're managed, and I will get into that in a little bit. And then this is the Christmas shearwater, and they are in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And then the the Bulwer's petrel is in the bottom center, and they're a little more cryptic. They are around, but they're small, and they're not so easy to see. And then finally, the a'o, or the Newell shearwater, is in this corner, and we do. They are also endangered, and we work with them in special predator-proof exclosures in the West Maui Mountains, which I'll show you also in a bit. We also have 2 of the world's 20 species of storm petrels. So kind of like the Bulwer's petrel, these are sort of smaller, cryptic seabirds, but this is the Tristram storm petrel over here, and the Bandrump storm petrel over here, which is also endangered. And we are working to attract and also detect where these birds may be living on Maui, but we haven't found a breeding location yet. We have 2 of the world's 3 species of tropic birds. So the red-tailed tropic bird is the kauai'ula, and the white-tailed tropic bird is the kauaekea. And these nest they're kind of like cliff dwellers, and they like to, you'll see them kind of soaring near the seashore, and they often do these pair dances in the sky, so if you ever see that, it's a real treat to watch. And we have 1 of the world's 5 species of frigate birds. So this is the Eva, the great frigate bird. And you may see these in large numbers off the coast, but they actually don't nest in Maui Nui, but they do roost around, so you will see them. And 3 of the world's 9 booby species nest here as well, and that's the masked booby, and then on the top is the brown booby, and then red-footed booby below him. And 6 of the world's 42 species of terns and noddies. So several of these may look similar. So for example, the black noddy and the brown noddy, which are kind of in the opposite corners there. We have the noyo, the black noddy here on Maui, but the rest of these are restricted to other islands. So like the manouku, which is the white tern in the top center, those actually nest on Oahu, and in Honolulu you can see them in the trees in the urban environment. So it's very special species there. And then also there's the grayback tern and the blue noddy and the sooty tern, or the eva eva. Okay, so we still have this great diversity of seabirds, and they occupy the habitats that, where they have been restricted to, because with all these threats in place, they still are able to find their place. And this is another great graphic, thanks to the Maui Ocean Center, and it kind of shows how they are able to find their niche and where they may do that on the island. So on Maui here, we have the ua'u kani, kind of down in the coastal habitats, and then also the or the red-footed booby. They're in the same zone, even though they have a different nesting habit. And then kind of in the mid-mountainous regions, we will see the a'o, or the Newell shearwater, and then finally up at the summit, the ua'u has been restricted up to these really high elevation, kind of very dry habitats. So these are the main species that we work with, And we do different sorts of techniques and measuring and monitoring, and we use different tools to kind of assess, what are the populations of these species like? How are they responding to management activities? And maybe how can we continue to help their habitat be able to sustain that population and then maybe even more birds, hopefully in the future. So just a little kind of intro about how some of these methods work. This is Ua'u on the summit on Haleakala. So we'll set up game cameras at the burrows, and we can track their behaviors, and we can also watch for predators, and if predators come, so there are feral cats, believe it or not, at 10,000 feet that do predate these seabirds, so we have to watch for them. And actually, Ua'u protection is a joint effort, so the majority of the population is within Haleakala National Park. So we share all the same methods and management activities to protect the population as a whole. But we work outside the park on the leeward slope in Nakula and Kihikinui. But as a whole, the Ua'u respond very well, and the trend seems to be that they are increasing in numbers over time. We also work with the AO, like I said, in these predator-proof predator-proof exclosures with these fences. So we have to build fences so that rats and mice can't dig under them, but then also so that cats can't climb over the top, and so mongoose can't weasel their way in anywhere. So the fences take a lot of maintenance, and of course we have to remove the predators from around so that they can't infiltrate. But we set up these boxes, and we set up attraction for the species. So we play their calls, and we set out decoys to bring the birds into this safe space. And we do see that the AO are successfully breeding in here. Curiously, though, we have we have all these boxes that are occupied by pairs or even 3 birds sometimes, but we've only had chicks come from one nest box so far. And then we sampled a bunch of them, and it turns out they're all females. Well, there's one male, but we haven't sampled him yet. But we know there's at least one male because there's a chick every year. So it's just an interesting thing we're learning about these attraction techniques for whatever calls we're playing are bringing in females mostly. So just, things that we have to learn and then try to build on so that we can really get a thriving population there. And then finally on Paualu Point, we monitor the boobies. So we have all 3 species of boobies out there. And this red-footed booby colony actually in 2018, I think, just showed up. There's hundreds of birds all of a sudden. They're very smart, and they picked a seabird sanctuary is actually where they set up their colony. So now there's over 1,000 red-footed boobies nesting and breeding out there. So we continue to monitor these populations, and we're working with state partners to get a predator-proof fence completed out there as well to further protect these birds. And then hopefully, even in the future, maybe attract in other species. Oh, that wasn't finally. So yes, and also the ua'ukani, the wedge-tail shearwater, these are the birds you will probably be most likely to see, in your daily, if you go visit the seashore. So at Kamaole 3, for example, in Kihei, also at Ho'okipa on the North Shore, and then at Kapalua, at Havea Point, we do the monitoring for these birds. And we've actually have been able to see that with just a little bit of management, so for example, removing predators from the colonies and doing some habitat restoration, like planting native plants in place of invasive weeds that we remove, the colony really responds. So we have 20 years of banding data where we tag the birds and then we read the bands again in the spring when the adults come back, and we can see that these birds have a really high survivorship once they've established in the colony, and so keeping that going over time not only emphasizes how important these activities are, but also provides a good model for how these activities can help other species too. So having this big long-term data set is really beneficial and fun to play with data sometimes, if you like that kind of thing. Okay, so that is the past and today's where we stand with seabirds, and Jay is going to bring us into the future.
Well, I don't know if I'll bring us into the future, but I'll attempt to show what we have to deal with and where we are coming and going from. So seabirds are in serious decline all across the globe. You can see this graph here. 70% of the monitored populations have been lost since 1950. It's a pretty serious decline. 43% of threatened or endangered are threatened or endangered now of all seabirds. And remember what Jenni talked about, the really significant inputs that seabird provides for the terrestrial habitat and the nearshore coral reef habitats. We really depend on those. As sea level rise continues to happen, the coral reef habitat here can protect us from that if we give it the nutrients it needs. But the seabirds are facing all these threats both at sea and at land. They're totally dependent on marine ecosystems for their food and where they live for the majority of their life. They fly over the ocean, they feed on the ocean, they rest on it for maybe 4% of their time, but they really depend on that. And now we are filling it up with lots of industrial fishing and plastic, and it's a severe threat. And on land, they face different threats. Predators, as Jenni said, were completely unknown to seabirds, or mammalian predators. Some of the seabirds preyed upon other seabirds, and in the areas where those birds lived, they adapted and learned ways to preserve their populations. But the seabirds of Hawaii had no mammalian predators at all. In fact, there were 2 mammal species here in Hawaii, one of them being the monk seal, which only spends its time at the beaches and doesn't eat any seabirds, and then the other being the hoary bat, which obviously is not a predator of seabirds either. But cats, rats, mongoose, pigs, goats, they all predate seabirds, and they're all here, and the only places where we can be assured that seabirds are going to be protected are the ones that we either build fences around or we're there very regularly doing removal of those predators. I guess I didn't click that in time to get all those in there. The other issue that goes on is the continuation of habitat loss. Before the Polynesians arrived, all of the habitat was available for the seabirds. The Polynesians came and they had lots of needs, like growing food. So they changed the habitat and they introduced the first rats to the population of animals on the island. And then the pueo showed up because they could feed on rats. They had tried before, but they didn't have a sufficient rodent population to keep them alive. But they've been here since the Polynesians have been as well. So another predator, the owl, pueo probably don't predate too many seabirds, but the barn owl was introduced even later on, and they do predate seabirds, so much so that they've been declared an injurious species here in Hawaii. Another threat, which is a real serious problem for the birds, is light pollution. We had a county council that worked diligently last term on an outdoor lighting ordinance and improved it dramatically for seabirds, for sea turtles, and for astronomy and for human health. A lot of the new ordinance will require that all lights are down-directed. They're shielded so that their light does not get out over the ocean, and it restricts the spectral content of the lights to less than 2% of the blue wavelengths, the short wavelength between 4 and 500 nanometers. It's been clearly shown for many species that those wavelengths are real detrimental. So at this time of year, we spend a lot of time with our seabirds recovering fallout birds. And here's a depiction of what happens with shearwaters. These are probably a study with Cory shearwaters, where the birds are leaving from their colony, which is up here at the where they all depart from, and they should be going straight out to sea. But instead, those blue areas are the areas where lights are shining, and they get distracted to those. And this tends to completely disorient them, and they fly round and round and round the lights. They get exhausted, they can't see what they're doing, they fly into buildings or into the lights themselves, or they crash on the ground. And then they're vulnerable to cats, dogs, getting run over by cars. So we have a program here to make people aware that this is happening and give you a number, 573 bird. If you see a bird on the ground, you can call us. We will come and get it. If it's in need of help right away, we encourage people to use a towel, cover it up, get it into a box with ventilation, and then call us. And we get a lot of birds that way. We're just at the end of the ua'u fledging season and beginning into the ua'ukani fledging season. Here is the fallout explained. And we need dark skies for many reasons. The birds definitely need them. The moon and the stars were what attracted them out over the sea before people got here with anthropogenic lights. And now when the moon is full, we get many fewer fallout birds than when the moon is new, because the lights of our cities are more dominant then. There's our number, 573 bird. Bird is 2473. If you don't remember the old dial phone that had those numbers and letters together. So the new ordinance is 5434, the Maui Dark Skies Ordinance. And here it shows you the spectral content. This is what we're trying to eliminate, this light here. This is what is distracting to birds, clearly distracting to turtles. Florida has enacted legislation where all lights anywhere visible from the seashore have to eliminate that short wavelength light. And the new LED lights, which are very energy efficient, are now nearly as efficient when you eliminate that light. And the people that develop these have now got them so that even when you eliminate that, you get good color rendering out of these lights. So we can anticipate in the next 3 years of implementation of the new outdoor lighting ordinance that our lights on our street lights will become much more like the lights on Hawaii Island. If you've been there, it's kind of a yellow-green color rather than that harsh, bright white color. The work we've been doing with the birds, we do see positive trends in the birds. This here is with the ua'u, where we really started working in 2014. The ungulate-proof fence was put up in Nakula, Kahikinui, and the ungulates were all removed from that area. When we started monitoring there, we had 8 burrows back here. And now we get the population has gone up, the reproductive success has gone up, and that's all from ungulates being kept out of there and running traps for cats and rats and mongoose. We actually catch mice as well, and the mice can predate seabirds as well. Jenni pointed out the a'o protection that we do in the fences at Makamaka'ole. And again, when we provide the protection, we draw them in there, the numbers go up. And the same with ua'ukani. And really, Maui County has been really good at providing us with funding to protect these birds. And it's a direct relationship. The more we can protect them, the better our reproductive success and numbers of birds that are there. A lot of these birds we're finding from a banding study that we do come from the offshore islets where there aren't any predators. Those islets are filled with birds, so being philopatric, they come back, they want to nest in there, but they can't find up space, so they go to the next nearest place. So for molokini, we do banding of chicks out there every fall. Those birds are often found at Kamaole 3. And in fact, we find them even as far away as Momomi on Molokai. So they aren't completely philopatric, but they do find other places. And if we can provide the protections there, then they will thrive. So the vast majority, as Jenni said, of the seabirds that remain in the Hawaiian archipelago are in Papahanaumokuakea. Literally millions of birds up there. And climate change has already started to raise its head and show us. Here you can see in the upper photo that just came on, East Island. In 2018, that island was there. This is in French Frigate Shoals. October of that year, Hurricane Walaka came along, and you can see all that is left of that island. And there were literally many hundreds of red-footed boobies, albatross, nesting on that island. We don't know that that's where our red-footed boobies came from, but that is the same year that all the birds that are at Paualu Point showed up. So it's possible, but this is just an example of what is going to happen. All those low islands and atolls are really vulnerable to sea level rise, and it's not just the fact that the sea comes up, it's the dynamic sea level rise. When it comes up like that, then when you have big waves that come, they come up even higher, and they take out all of these areas that were low-lying previously. So this is viewing Paualu Point. We need to keep on working and looking at this area. The boobies found this. You can see how high this is. This is an area that we look to get a predator-proof fence in, and we can potentially bring some of those birds from the Northwest Islands here to continue to have a place where they can thrive. And we look for these all around the islands. Much of this work is already going on Oahu. There have been birds translocated from Kure, the most northern island, and from a couple of the other islets up there that are really vulnerable, and they bring them down, put them in artificial burrows, feed the chicks. The chicks are taken before they come out of their burrows, because it's when they come out that they fixate on the stars, the orientation there, and their magnetic sense of where they are. So if you take them out before that, bring them here, feed them in the burrow, and then when they get to fledging age, they come out of their burrow where you've put them, and then when they come back, that's their new home. That's what they've fixated on. So we hope to continue that kind of work across all of the islands. We need to in order to have enough places for these birds to go. On Molokai, back in the background of this picture, you can see this fence. This is a predator-proof fence that's been put around the area of Mokio. Molokai Land Trust started working on first vegetation out there, and they cleaned off all the kiawe that was growing there. And it turned out that native plant seed bank was still there underneath the kiawe. So when they removed that, the native plants came back. The Land Trust guys have also done nursery raising of plants, and they've just created a really wonderful coastal strand habitat. And a few years ago, the American Bird Conservancy and our project got together with Molokai Land Trust and put in a social attraction project for Moli. So we broadcast calls of the Moli, and we have decoys. Those are in the center of the picture there, that the Moli flying by hear and see, and they stop and they land. And we've had several birds land there already, but we have yet to have any establish a colony. But this takes time. And this fence has just been completed, or is almost completed right now. So we really need to get all of the predators out of there. Uwakani have colonized it. We had a number of chicks banded for 2 years, and then the year before this, a mongoose got in and wiped out all of them. But this year, we went back, and there were a dozen burrows, and we banded 9 chicks out of all of those. This means it's a really good sign. At Havea Point and at Momomi, similar things happened. In 2000, in both of those colonies, there weren't any birds. At Havea Point, there was a gentleman, Isao Nakagawa, who started fishing there after he retired from Maui land and pineapple. And he saw dead birds on the ground. He said, "What is going on?" And got in touch with Fern Duvall at Division of Forestry and Wildlife, who provided him with traps, and he started catching the cats and the mongoose that were predating the birds. So in 2001, they had chicks fledged from there. And now we have nearly 3,000 burrows out there, maybe more. We have to count again this year. So, and the same thing happened at Momomi. The Nature Conservancy started working there, cleared the vegetation, the Kiave started doing predator control, and the birds came back. And all of this is what we need to have happen to feed not only the terrestrial habitat where those birds are, but that near-shore coral reef habitat, so that we have a thriving ecosystem that will help protect us from the sea level rise, which is coming. So thank you for your attention. Here are our contacts if you would like to get to know more about seabirds. Our website has a lot more information.
All righty. Can we get one more round of applause for both of our speakers for coming out this evening? Thank you folks so much for educating us. I know I picked up some new tidbits tonight. It never fails. All righty, folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our question and answer session. Like I mentioned earlier, what we're going to do is have our Sphere staff, which there's one on either side of the stairwell here. Each one of them is holding a microphone. That way, if anybody is watching from the live stream that can't be with us, they'll be able to hear your question on the microphone. So if you have a question, just give us a little wave, and we'll bring that microphone over to you, and we'll have you ask the question into the microphone, both for our ears up at the front, but also for those who might be listening in. All righty, does anybody have any questions for our speakers this evening? Or it'll just go real fast. There we go.
Yeah, Jenny, you mentioned that the birds have an organ on their beak to excrete salt. Do they not have kidneys, or they have kidneys that do other things besides excreting the salt?
I'll let you guys take it out.
They do have kidneys, but the filtering of salt happens behind the nares, those holes in the bill. And so there's a special gland there because, as you know, we drink water without salt in it, and seabirds are drinking only salt water. So they need that additional work. Their kidneys are not developed to exclude that salt. Interesting thing about that gland is if you happen to have a seabird and you give it fresh water for a week, that gland will atrophy and it will not come back. So that's just a word of caution. If anybody does find a bird, we always ask no food, no water. And especially the water, because they get all the water they need from the food that they eat and from seawater, and they're capable of dealing with it.
All righty, thank you. I learned something. All righty, does anybody else have a question? Yeah. All righty, we're going to...
I've always been interested. I've been up in the northwest of Hawaiian Islands. I worked at lots of coast. But
And for those folks who are listening on the live stream, he was asking if one of the 3 albatross species that we have in the Hawaiian Islands is one of the largest species of albatross.
Good question. Our species are not the largest albatross in the world. In fact, the Maui is one of the smaller albatross in the world. The short-tailed albatross is a good deal larger. The Kaupu, the black-footed albatross, is a bit larger, but the wandering albatross, which is in the southern hemisphere, is the much larger albatross species.
I wanted to ask you which species is on Haleakala in the cliffs up there?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Which species roosts or nests up on Haleakala at the top?
Yeah, so the bird on Haleakala is the uwa'u. It's the Hawaiian petrel. From the subfossil record, they were the most numerous birds in all of the islands, and they are the birds that the archaeologists who have looked at those subfossil records say when they came in, they completely obscured the sky at night. They come in at night, and there were so many of them, and they would have been nesting all the way from the beaches to the mountaintops. And so there were so many that you can imagine what it smelled like here.
Hi, I have a slightly Lahaina-centric question. With talk of restoring water and wetlands post-fire into the Lahaina area, two-parter. One, do you expect if some of those things happen, that will have a measured increased attraction to the seabirds on that part of the island? And are you doing any kind of advocacy for something like that?
We would certainly hope that seabirds are taken into consideration. We have, before the fire, been working with groups like the Nature Conservancy and looking at areas where sea level rise is happening, what is the prediction for where they were, particularly in the Olowalu area, and where, in planning ahead for that area, where would be the appropriate areas to dedicate for seabird colonies. And we will definitely be trying to insert that into the conversation to ask, okay, as we rebuild here, as we look at how do we get back to balance, and restoring wetlands for us is an important part. The habitat is equally important as the species that are there. So how can we humans have our dwelling areas? How can we have the ecosystem that allows the water to flow in the ways that it used to? And where can seabirds be populating that they can bring their contribution to help the whole system work together?
Thank you.
All righty. Does anybody else have any other questions for either of our speakers? All righty. Well, if anybody's microphone shy, not to worry. Both of our speakers will be up here at the front for the next 10 to 15 minutes to chat with you folks. We'll go ahead and be respectful of everybody's time and wrap it up this evening. Can I get one more round of applause for my speakers? Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you folks so much for coming out this evening. As always, we appreciate you guys coming out and learning about the ocean and its conservation. As you guys exit, like I mentioned, you'll be able to speak with our speakers on a more one-on-one, but also we will have Emily, who works for the Seabird Recovery Project as well. You may have noticed her here, she's giving you a wave up here at the front. You may have noticed on their way in that they did have a donations table with all kinds of fun goodies if you want to contribute financially to their cause. They have some really epic hats, which I own an embarrassing amount of, but they got all kinds of fun information and pamphlets up there as well, so make sure you guys stop by and check that out. Thank you guys so much, and have a lovely rest of your evening. Mahalo.